some TNT and dynamite. And I'll win the fight. TNT, I'm a power load. TNT.
Hey, what's up everybody? It is Tuesday, May 12th, 2020, and we are ready for TNT today. Alright, so the other night at dinner, we had lasagna. And I was looking at the noodle that makes up the lasagna, the actual lasagna noodle itself, and I thought this was somewhat of an interesting model. So I went to the pantry and I pulled one of these out, and there's some pretty weird, crazy stuff going on there, and there's some like sort of shape warping and morphing that's going on with this. So I think we're going to try this today. We're going to see how this goes. This could be somewhat interesting. Alright, so let's go ahead, let's get started. So I'm going to come out here, I'm going to start up a brand new standard inch IPT. I'm going to start a 2D sketch. I'm going to pick on any plane. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to be selecting on 2-point center rectangle. I'm going to start this from the origin, and I'm going to go ahead and send this out a distance of 9, and the actual thickness of the noodle is 0.03125. Alright, so we have that done. I'm going to go ahead and finish the sketch. Now I'm going to go out here and do an extrude. It's going to be a symmetrical extrusion, and the actual noodle itself is about 2 inches wide. Alright, so we have that done. Alright, so now I'm going to start a 2D sketch. I'm going to come here to this face. I'm going to pick and pull. I'm going to go ahead and bring this out a distance of 0.25. Alright, so now I'm sketching on this work plane. It's offset 0.25. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right here to the end. I'm going to draw a circle starting from this midpoint right here, and that is going to have a diameter of 0.25. So if you actually count up the number of loops there are in this lasagna noodle going all the way across to the end of this, you're going to see there's like 37 of them. At least mine is. I don't know, is lasagna all created the same? I'm not sure, but who cares? Alright, so what I'm going to do is once I have this done, I'm going to come out here and draw a line. I'm going to start this from the center point. I'm going to send this out a pretty good distance because I want to use that later when I go to use rectangular pattern. Alright, so once that line has been drawn, I'm going to come up here, pick on rectangular pattern. I'm going to go ahead and pick on my circle. I'm going to go to my red arrow, and I'm going to go ahead and select on that line I just created, and I'm going to tell Inventor I want 37 of these, and I want these to be spaced 0.25 apart. Now, the one thing that you're going to have to remember is to hit the double chevrons and uncheck where it says associative, and I'm now going to go ahead and say OK. So we can see this goes all the way to the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to draw a line. I'm going to start this from right here at the center point. I'm going to send this straight up just like so. I'm also going to come to the end here, draw a line starting from that center point, keep it totally vertical. I'm going to send this up and go past that circle. Alright, so now that we have that done, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come up here, go to trim, and I'm now going to go ahead and start trimming this out to where we get this sort of sine wave look for this sort of ribbon part. I guess that's on the end or the edge of the actual lasagna noodle. So I'm going to go ahead and start trimming this. Now here's a great thing with trim is you can just pick, hold, and drag, and you can actually go out there and trim out the geometry that you need. Now since there are so many of these, alright, what I'm going to have to do here is pause. Alright, but you sort of get the idea. We're going to take this all the way to the end. So just a slight pause. Okay, so I'm coming up here at the end. I'm going to go ahead and just trim these portions out. I'm going to right click and say OK. I'm going to go ahead and grab this line. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. I no longer need that. And I can see that sort of sine wave sort of look that we have for our profile that goes from one end to the other. Alright, so the next part, this gets a little bit more interesting, and there's going to have to be another pause because it's going to take us a while, is I'm going to come up here and pick on offset. Now, unfortunately with offset, we can't like pick, hold, and drag and do, crossing windows or selection windows because we have to actually pick each piece of geometry, and this does take some time. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to come up here, pick on offset, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and pick every single segment that makes up this sort of ribbon profile here on the side. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and continue this all the way down to the end. So slight pause. Okay, so I've selected all those pieces of geometry from the left side, and I'm coming down here to the end. So I'm going to go ahead and pick on the last two. I'm now going to go ahead and right click and say continue. Now we can see that dynamic dynamic input box shows up, and what that is telling us is the actual offset distance that we have to plug in. So what I'm going to recommend you do is go back to the place where you started this and get your cursor in there, and now go ahead and type in 0.03125 divided by 2. Alright, so the issue is now we have to do this for the bottom side of it as well. So once again, I'm going to start up with offset. Once again, I'm going to start with the bottom portion of this profile, and now I'm going to go from left all the way down to the very right hand side of this. I need to select every single piece of the geometry that makes up that profile. So once again, another slight pause. Okay, so I started from the left hand and went all the way down to the right side of it. I picked every piece of the profile that makes up that ribbon portion. I'm going to right click and say continue. And now once again, I'm going to go back to where I started, and I'm going to move that cursor right in there, and now I can push to the left hand side of this, and I'm going to go ahead and offset that in 0.03125 divided by 2. Alright, so I have the profile I'm looking for. I'm going to right click and say OK, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and draw a line starting from here to here. I'm going to go ahead and cap off that profile, come down here to the end. I'm going to draw a line from here to here, cap that off. I'm going to go ahead and say OK, and I'm going to go ahead and finish the sketch. Alright, so while we're here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pick on plane. I'm going to pick on this face. I'm going to go ahead and rotate this around, orbit this around, and what I'm going to do is pick on this face. So when I do that, now I have a work plane that's going right through the center, okay, of that lasagna noodle. So this is a very, very critical point, and I probably should have been saving up to this point, but what I would recommend that you do before we go out there and do the loft here in a second is go ahead and give this a name. So I'm going to go ahead and just give this a name like lasagna noodle. I'm going to say this is number 3. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here, I'm going to pick on loft, and I'm just going to kind of hover over this. I'm going to go ahead and pick this. It's going to recognize that that is a profile. And now what I'm going to do is stay here towards the left hand side of the noodle. I'm going to go ahead and pick on that, and everything's going to loft over just like there it goes. And that's exactly why I told you to save it. I don't know if you just caught that, but it just totally bounced. It didn't like that. So let's try it again. Let's go with loft. We're going to go pick the profile. Okay, it likes that. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to stay towards the left-hand side. Pick the bottom of this. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And there we go. So we got our loft, all right? So we can see that ribbon and sort of edge. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here, go to mirror. I'm going to go ahead and select on that loft that we just did. Go to the red arrow for mirror plane. Pick on the mirror plane. It's going to flip it over to the other side. And we have ourselves a lasagna noodle. Yeah, so that one's a really clicky sort of model. I haven't really found a way to sort of perfect that and speed that up, just because it's so particular on the geometry that we have to pick. But we have that sort of morphing, from the ribbon edge into the flat back into the ribbon edge, which we're able to just flip it over using mirror. But lofting is definitely one of those features that Inventor has more of a tendency to fail on, because if you think about it, look at the geometry we were crunching from that ribbon sort of profile into a flat. So sometimes it doesn't like it. So that's exactly why I told you to save that prior to going into trying the loft. Otherwise, you're going to lose all that painstaking work that we just did for creating that profile. But that's kind of a cool one. I really enjoyed the doing the lasagna noodle. That's kind of cool. Looks pretty much like the real thing. Even the ends of it, when you sort of look at that, you can see how it sort of rises up on the edges. But that's it. All right, so that's a fun one we just had for TNT today. I'll see you soon.